We're going to have ICE surround the polls come November. We're not going to sit here and allow you to steal the country again. And you can whine and cry and throw your toys out of the pram all you want, but we will never again allow an election to be stolen. But let's put you on notice again. ICE is going to be around the polls in the 2026 midterm elections.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. We have been sounding the alarm about this very thing. ICE's brutality on the streets of America's cities is practice. They are coming for our elections. I suppose we're lucky in a way that the veil has been ripped off and that Democrats in Congress have some time to prepare. There are laws that might counter this threat. But the Trump regime is laying the groundwork for massive voter suppression. It starts with testing the waters rhetorically and seeing the reaction. Steve Bannon floated the idea, and here's the White House press secretary adding fuel to the fire.
I can guarantee to the American public that ICE will not be around polling locations or voting locations in November.
I can't guarantee that an ICE agent won't be around a polling location in November. I mean, that's frankly a very silly hypothetical question.
Carolyn Leavitt could have easily said, no, the Trump administration will not deploy ICE to polling places. But she didn't, for a reason. My friend Chris Goldsmith, Army vet, founder of Vets Fighting Fascism, and host of the On Offense podcast, has been way out front on this. His job before Trump was reelected was tracking neo-Nazi and extremist gangs and holding their members accountable. Now, some of those very same people are wearing ICE badges. Listen to Chris. He has been right about this stuff longer than anyone else. Chris, welcome to the show. It feels like everything we have been warning about for the last couple years, and certainly for the last few months as we've seen ICE's tactics on the streets of America's cities, it's now being openly proposed by people very close to the president and in no way disavowed by the White House itself. I'm talking about the deployment of ICE to polling places.
Yeah. And this past week, the Democrats have issued 10 demands to allow for DHS funding to move forward. And included among them is not, don't intimidate people at polling places. So while I'm glad that Democrats are starting to move in the right direction, demanding body cameras, individual identifying information, simple name tapes like every other law enforcement officer, and a lack of masks, if there's not an explicit law preventing them from activity near or at polling places, I don't think that we should expect anything less than Donald Trump to try to use ICE to intimidate voters in every, so-called blue state and blue city around the country.
Let's explain what the other side's rhetoric is. We know the underlying motivation. They're terrified of a fair vote because they know they will get crushed. I think there was another special in Louisiana with a 37-point shift. I mean, it is going to be, tsunami doesn't even begin to describe what's about to happen in November. But what they're saying is they want to keep illegals from voting. Can you just explain how ridiculous that argument is, given the security with which our elections take place?
I think a lot of us have forgotten on, the left, people who are consuming mainstream news, how critical the slogan "Stop the Steal" was to Donald Trump in 2020. Yeah. It was not the first time that phrase had been uttered. It had been used by Roger Stone for years and years and years prior to the 2020 elections. Donald Trump is still convinced that he won California in 2020. He believed, and he dispatched Chris Kobach way back in the day during his first administration to try and find evidence of undocumented immigrants voting illegally, which there is no evidence. So this is what MAGA is steeped in, is this belief that we have not had a free and fair election in over 8 years. So MAGA is primed to accept the idea of ICE agents being used to catch undocumented immigrants as they're trying to vote, which is not going to happen and never has happened.
Never has. We're flashing a graphic on the screen here about this review of voter polls in Utah. 2.1 million registrations They found one person who was improperly registered who did not vote. Like, it's not a thing. Undocumented people voting in America's elections doesn't happen. But our information ecosystem is so stovepiped that if all you're consuming is Fox News, much less Steve Bannon, you think that that's how Joe Biden got elected. So that's the rationale they're rolling out. The real reason we know is to intimidate voters. And it feels like their operations in Minneapolis and elsewhere are a practice run. When I hear people say they need better training, they need better leadership, I used to agree. My gut response is shifting now towards actually they're doing what they're being told to do.
Yeah.
They are doing what they've been trained to do, which is intimidate law-abiding Americans.
Yeah, if you look at any of the videos online of ICE interacting with local citizens, whether they're legal observers or protesters or just random people getting harassed by ICE as they're walking down the street, you can see that it is core to the identity of ICE to just be fascists, to just be out there intimidating people, threatening them, not just with legal action, but you've seen these ICE agents say that they're going to kill people, that they're going to lay hands on them and then charge them, right?
Let's roll this clip of an ICE agent saying, if you raise your voice, I'll erase your voice. There's no way to misinterpret that. Here it is.
I will tell you this, brother.
What?
You know, I will tell you this. You raise your voice, I raise your voice.
If I raise my voice, you'll erase my...
Exactly, yeah. Yeah.
Are you serious? You said if I raise my voice, you'll erase my voice?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
This time of year always gives me a bit of a break. Things slow down just enough to notice what really matters. A quiet moment with someone I care about, a conversation with a close friend. Looking around and realizing this life I'm building is worth protecting. But with that realization comes weight, the responsibility of protecting the people you care about, planning for the future, making sure the foundation is solid. And honestly, that can feel overwhelming, especially when you start thinking about insurance and financial planning. That's why I trust Policy Genius. Policy Genius isn't an insurance company. It's an online marketplace that helps you find and buy insurance. You can compare quotes from some of America's top insurers side by side for free. And their licensed team works for you, not for any one company. Their guidance is about your needs and what actually makes sense for your life. What stands out to me is how simple they make it. Coverage amounts, prices, terms, no guesswork, just clarity. They help answer your questions, handle the paperwork, and advocate for you the whole way through. And I've heard from a lot of you who've used Policy Genius and had great experiences, finding affordable policies and real peace of mind. If you want to start the year with more clarity and security, now's a good time to take that step. Plan the year knowing you've protected what you've built. With Policy Genius, you can see if you can find 20-year life insurance policies starting at just $276 a year for $1 million in coverage. Head to policygenius.com/Ken to compare life insurance quotes from top companies and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/Ken. It's Ken Harbaugh with a quick break to tell you about something new. Battle Buddies is my latest weekly show where I try to find common ground with a conservative who I consider a true friend, David Bellavia, the only surviving Medal of Honor recipient from the war in Iraq. A Navy vet, an Army vet from opposite ends of the political spectrum, engaging in a civil conversation like we used to have. From the ICE immigration crackdowns to Trump's takeover of Venezuela, David and I take on the toughest issues of the day with genuine respect for each other, in spite of our very different perspectives. They're not always easy conversations, but they're always important, and that's something we need more of. Respectful dialogue between people who disagree, but who have figured out how to stay friends. Check out Battle Buddies today. 2 vets, 2 views, 1 nation. Find us on the Valor Media Network. The link's below. Thanks. So you're right, Chris. They are doing exactly what their leadership has told them to do, and they feel this chilling sense of impunity. I mean, the officer who delivered that capital threat, that threat to kill someone, wasn't even wearing a mask.
Yeah.
The arrogance with which they are intimidating law-abiding Americans is shocking.
Yeah, and at a certain point, I'm kind of glad that this is happening, because we need to have the average American fully understand the threat of fascism in order to motivate them to do it. That's why, I, on my next upcoming episode of On Offense, I interviewed this author, Christopher Mathias, who wrote the book To Catch a Fascist. He started writing this 3 years ago. He started writing this during the Biden administration, when it wasn't clear that Donald Trump was going to win or that he would pardon all the January 6th insurrectionists, right? But he ended his book, locking in the final text in 2025, writing about the lawlessness of ICE and comparing them to how then, last summer, they looked like Patriot Front. They were wearing polo shirts and khakis and masks. They looked like a neo-fascist organization in an unlawful militia. But since he locked in that text, there has been a change. Now they're all wearing camouflage. Now they're all wearing combat gear, and they're using, what is effectively a grenade launcher to shoot people in the face with chemical agents from, an arm's length away. These are all things that if we did in a theater of war, we would be court-martialed for, and we would probably spend the rest of our lives in prison. But ICE has been given this permission structure with people like J.D. Vance coming out and saying you have absolute immunity to the ICE agents for anything that they do while in uniform, which is not the law, but it is the way that the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi is trying to apply the law.
I think that most of these ICE agents actually believe their leadership, actually believe the Trump regime when it says they have absolute immunity. It's the only way to explain how they're behaving. Add to that the guarantee of a presidential pardon, at least in their minds, when they do cross whatever theoretical line might be drawn. And so I think it's incumbent upon Democratic leadership and us, people with platforms, to communicate to them in this moment that accountability is coming. We had Ruben Gallego on the Midas Defense podcast talking about how he's going to wait in the tall grass as long as he has to make sure Greg Bovino never sees his pension. It's that kind of accountability, those kinds of consequences that we need to communicate now to keep more Alex Preddies and Renee Goods and others from being killed.
Yeah. When I launched an organization called Veterans Fighting Fascism, I did not think that I would be training people in the skills that they need that are necessary, not just to hold neo-Nazis who run around with masks accountable, but to hold federal agents who are doing precisely everything that neo-Nazis have wished that they could do to black and brown and other immigrant people and people of all sorts of minorities, right? DHS agents have been threatening to kill people, saying like that lesbian in Minnesota, right? That is the language of ICE, threatening to kill other Americans and identifying someone who's already been murdered by ICE as a lesbian, not as an American citizen, not as a protester, but that is the identity that ICE is thinking of when they think about how they want to be able to engage in capital murder with no consequences. But I have a promise for ICE that democracy will survive, and people like me and people who engage in open source intelligence research will gain great joy in holding every one of you legally accountable. This is not a threat for any sort of extrajudicial thing. This is, we are going to apply the laws that are on the books, and where laws aren't strong enough, our democracy will strengthen them. Things like conspiracy against rights and violating civil rights under color of law, those are already on the books. We don't need new laws to prosecute ICE, and we will. I hope that whoever runs for president on the Democratic side is prepared to install an attorney general who has experience in RICO cases, that is bringing down organized crime, because that is what DHS has essentially become. We've seen the Trump administration engaging in just absolutely transparently corrupt practices in fundraising for their personal businesses and mixing the White House privileged access to information and individuals to personally enrich themselves. All of these people will be held accountable someday.
I hope it becomes a litmus test in the Democratic primary for the 2028 nomination, that you're going to do that you're going to hold ICE and DHS and all of those who use their power as government agents to infringe upon the rights of Americans and residents alike. That has got to be a test for the next Democratic nominee for president. Last question. How should we be thinking about Donald Trump's threat to nationalize elections? And he weirdly said in 15 places. I don't know where that number comes from, but the very idea of nationalizing them anywhere feels like a threat to democracy with this regime in charge.
Donald Trump often floats his terrible policy ideas before trying to implement them. And that is what we witnessed when he went on Dan Bongino's show and said that he wanted to nationalize elections. He's communicating to Republicans in Congress and Republicans in state houses around the country that he wants them to change the law to make it so that they can rig elections any way they want. He started floating the idea of Texas adding 5 Republicans to their congressional maps through mid-decade gerrymandering, right? He started floating that idea before the Republicans said, okay, yes, order received, we'll do it. Now, I don't think that Donald Trump learns his lesson ever, and we have seen Democrats succeeding in more successful counter gerrymandering. So I think that Donald Trump using this rhetoric should hopefully help people understand Democrats in office who are often way too cautious. I'm speaking about leadership here, Schumer and Jeffries, that they need to flex power for power's sake and to make sure that the fascists can never seize power through illegal means. And the ways that they are going to have to do that, it may include gerrymandering the hell out of every state and adding new states to the union, like Washington, D.C. It means getting rid of the filibuster and expanding the size of the Supreme Court, adding new federal districts around the country, adding new courts. As we've seen in Minnesota, there is currently not a lot of backstop. When people resign from their roles in DOJ, there are not prosecutors to handle cases. So it is clear that we have a need with the backlog of cases. We need a stronger and bigger federal court system. And I think that should be a priority of the next Democratic Congress and the next Democratic president, to expand the court system, because we're going to need them to prosecute ICE.
Agreed. Nothing should be off the table. Thanks, Chris. We'll put all the links to the latest book you're reviewing and the On Offense podcast in the notes below. Great having you.
Thanks, brother.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.